Yo, welcome to F1 or F Off. You're on
Yo.
your pit stop for F1 news, laughs, interviews, dabs, and race reviews.
And flailing arms.
I'm your host, Idris.
And I'm Gabe.
All right, y'all. It's been a minute since we've been back. Let's see. The last episode we recorded was about Hamilton winning at Silverstone. We missed last week's race.
Well, we didn't miss it.
Well, we missed it. We watched it, but we
Right.
missed the recording. Yeah, we got lives, y'all, outside of talking about Formula One. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Austria. It was Austria, yes. We'll talk about Austria, and we're definitely going to talk about Spa-Francorchamps. And we're also going to talk about the Olympics, and we're also going to talk about IndyCar. And we're going to talk about some wild news that came out of the Formula One sphere this week. So there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So much to jam into 40, 50 minutes. We'll see where this ends up. But,
Right.
But Monsieur Gabe, Monsieur Francis Fischer, how was your weekend?
Right.
How you been?
Oh, oui. Pretty good. This weekend was like the first weekend I've had in a while where we didn't really have too many obligations to do. Like we were just able to like chill, relax, and actually get some Max and relax and all cool. But also be able to get to a lot of unpacking and putting stuff away that I've been meaning to get to. So feeling pretty good about that. We just, we sat, we watched the Olympics, the opening ceremony, and then we've been watching some of the footage. So, I definitely want to talk about that, but what have you been up to? How was your weekend?
Dude, it's been the same thing over here at Chez Idris. It's definitely been a lot of Olympics season. I'm actually really glad the summer break is coming up for F1 just because now I can focus on Olympics. Because I love the Olympics. There's something about seeing like every country put their best athletes together, and it's like really wholesome, right? Like, of course, there's the whole like the Olympic Committee is super corrupt and everything. But at its base level, right? Like what it represents is like so human and so inspiring. And like, I get like emotional thinking about it, like I feel like it's the one time of the year or, not it's every 4 years, right? But every 4 years I can sit down and like yell USA, USA. And I feel like I won't be judged for it. You know what I mean? And like, it feels good to do that too. Right.
Yeah.
Because typically it's just like frat bros who are doing that. I'm like, I don't want to be associated with that. But I'm happy to see like LeBron James just like holding the flag like he's Washington crossing the Delaware. Like that was dope.
Right. Well, you get those moments where you can. It's like what was I going to say? It's sort of You can have a moment where you feel prideful in being, being American. Actually just like being stoked about like sports. If you're not a sports person. But no, I hear you on the whole corrupt thing. And one thing that I was interesting, I didn't realize too, is that with the Summer Olympics they have, there's a lot of political stuff involved, right? So like Russia's not there. But what they did was they created a neutral banner for like people who have a valid passport and qualify to be able to compete under that's not their nation's flags, which I found is interesting. I also saw that there's like a refugee team, which I think is really awesome. I also saw like there's all that things with, I think like with Taiwan, like they can't fly under the Thai flag, so they had to like create like another thing to like, there's all these weird like kind of political like sort of shuffling around that happens. And there's also a lot of people that will change their allegiance, like they live in America and they've been in America for a while, but then they just wanted to compete under like the Romanian flag because they're like families from Romania. It's like, that's interesting.
That's like Naomi Osaka, right?
But let's talk about the opening ceremonies really quick though, because
Well, real quick
That was
before,
that was something.
yeah, that was definitely a thing we watched. So I texted you, right? I texted you like in all right, so Gabe and I were in this group chat with our friends, right? And I on my end, I just titled it the boys, right?
Mm.
And so I text the boys chat and I'm like, yo, guys, opening ceremony so far is mid, right? Because I had only made it in after, let's see, we saw Lady Gaga do her thing,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
I thought that was weird because it's like it would be cool to see like a French artist do this, you
That was
know?
my thought. Yeah.
But
But
okay, cool. Like,
but but if you think about it in retrospective, she was the opening act, and like all of the performers that pretty much came after that for the most
sure,
part were
we're
either
French,
French or
French
we'll get to
adjacent.
it. Yeah.
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 And so yeah, so it started off with her, right? And I was like, okay. And then it went to the can line dance. And like,
Mhm.
dude, like
Like EDM can
I was
too.
like, what is this can like it like I don't know if there was just like really bad sound attenuation and they were not all like in sync with like the kicking. Like, is a can supposed to look like that? I always thought it was supposed to be like hit, 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 right? Where everyone was just like on it,
Well, like
like the Rockettes, but it wasn't
yeah.
like that.
Well, like the normal can, right? It's like da 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 da
Kick,
da
kick,
da 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 da
kick,
da da da.
kick, right?
But with theirs was like da 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 da, and it was
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like EDM in the background. I'm like, what is happening? Like this is so bizarre. And like, what was it? Like everyone was in like it was like was that where they were in like crazy pink outfits or
yes,
something?
yes,
Right?
yeah.
Um yeah. Oh, and then let's talk about this Assassin's Creed parkour like phantom
Monsieur
like
SEO,
yeah, like the first thing that happens is like what is
Zizu,
Zinedine
yeah, yeah,
Zidane
yeah, yeah.
um shows up and everyone's like freaking out because it's like, oh, it's
Oh my
him.
god,
And I was
it's the
like, oh,
god.
that guy.
Yeah.
And I had to show Lauren the video of him headbutting some dude in the chest. And I was hoping he was gonna do that, but he never did. So I was
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, and then he passes it off to some kids, and all of a sudden becomes like a horror movie all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what
In the
is happening?
catacombs, yeah.
It's like this mysterious guy in this rowboat, and he just like beckons them down, and it's like, yes, 100% Assassin's Creed. But then you see them in the boat, like in the live feed, and it's like
Yeah.
my thought was just like, oh, his boat he magically got a motor boat for the thing, because the video was him rowing, and then
Yeah,
all of a
yeah,
sudden he's
that's
just
right.
like sitting there with like a little engine. Hell.
Yeah. And then what was crazy too is like
Uh,
is all the cuts throughout the city of him like this dude was running through Paris for 4 hours, y'all.
yeah.
Like
Well, I think
this
there were multiple people. I don't
sure,
think it was
probably yeah,
only
multiple
him,
people,
you
but
know?
like it was a thing of hours and hours. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, they're really doing this, right? And
Mhm.
I don't know, I know they need to do pre-recorded stuff to kind of help push the story and theme that they're doing, right? But like, I don't know, I almost kind of really don't like the pre-recorded stuff. I just like seeing the live stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like the pre-recorded stuff I
Um,
can just find on YouTube. Like
yeah,
just yeah.
it was weird cuts, you know? Yeah. I also thought though, I was just like, okay, the thing about this that I like, I mean, for a second, I thought that this whole entire Olympics opening ceremony was just
Mhm.
a giant reveal for the new Assassin's Creed game, and like that was like the meta game.
Yeah.
Um, which honestly, Assassin's Creed game in Paris, like Victorian era, would actually be
Mhm.
pretty cool. I don't know if
Isn't
they've
that
done it, but
Unity? I think Unity was that pretty
is
much.
Unity in Paris? I don't
I
remember.
can't recall.
I haven't played it since like Assassin's Creed 2. So,
Mm.
um, but the thing that I found interesting about it though was that parkour is like
Mhm.
very much like a French
It
thing. That's
is.
like where it was like started, where it became popular. So him running along the rooftops, I thought was really dope. And
Yeah.
then it made me think, why is parkour not an Olympic event?
Mm.
Like it involves a lot of flipping, a lot
Yeah.
of like it's like a giant obstacle course like
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I know it's sort of expressive, but so is gymnastics, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I think like that should be something that like I mean they added breakdancing this year, which I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. And like skateboarding, I'm like, okay, cool. But let's do some like Ninja Warrior stuff up in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want to see some obstacle courses. I'd watch the hell out of that.
I think
Um
one element of that is that it does take time for a sport to be officially like brought in onto the Olympics. like for instance, I love Ultimate for those that don't know. So
Mhm.
I play a lot of Ultimate, playing summer leagues, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and I've been playing for a very long time. But with Ultimate, that was recognized by the Olympic Committee. Like this is maybe several years back. So I want to say
Mhm.
5, 6 years ago now, maybe even longer than that. But it's still not in the Olympics, right? But you can go to like the World Games where you kind of get prepped for eventual like acceptance into the Olympics, right?
Mhm.
And I think part of that is that you need to have there needs to be like an agreed upon rule set, right, by all the
Mhm.
different governing bodies across the world. There needs to be governing bodies.
Yeah.
There needs to be like regulations around like how this game is played internationally, all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So it takes time. So parkour, I think, could be in the Olympics. There's no reason it can't be. I think there just needs to be like an established rule set and governing bodies in different regions of the world to actually
Yeah.
get it there. So
Yeah. Well, hopefully it does, 'cause I would love to see some ultimate. I'd also love to see some parkour.
yeah,
But instead we have like
dabs.
yeah. Yeah, can we talk about that? So there's the section where they do the Louis Vuitton bag and stuff,
Yes,
which like I didn't realize, I didn't make the connection King Louis, Louis Vuitton, the like
neither did
pattern.
I.
I never
Yeah.
made that connection until like uh, Friday. So I was like,
Well,
oh, okay.
and did you make
Um,
that connection after Kelly Clarkson made that connection? Because she
yes,
just kept
yes.
talking about it, like, "Oh, I'm in
Uh-huh. Yeah.
trouble. Oh, my
Yeah.
manager's gonna call me." Like,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm just
Kelly,
like, oh
like,
God,
I want to
let it
watch
play
it.
out.
I want to
Like,
watch it.
only talk when they're like people are waving with the flags. But anyway, I don't know if any of you guys noticed, but they had some very eccentric dancing. Um, and one guy in particular, I guess I heard this morning that there is possibility that there was apparently some strike, some dancers strike or something, and like that was like a because there was a guy that literally like there were some people that were doing some like really intricate moves and stuff, and there's this guy that was just like flailing his arms like I I laughed so hard when I saw that I had to go back and rewatch it. But I guess apparently it's possible that he was doing that as like a protest of like I can perform more, but I'm going to do this ridiculous thing just to kind of
Mm,
this is what you get for what you pay me,
yeah.
which I think is fascinating. But it made for a pretty incredible viral moment.
Mhm.
But let's talk about let's talk about the moment that turned it around for me.
Oh my God. We're talking the same one, right? Like you get
Yeah,
like
you.
headless Marie
Mm-hmm.
Antoinette, or I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was Marie Antoinette, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you know, she,
Liberté.
yeah, and then start singing, and then I think it's Les Mis, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
they're doing like the
yeah,
Les Mis
yeah, they
thing.
go from Les
Yeah.
Mis into like Marie Antoinette singing into just this lady coming across on a boat, and you're like, all right, this is cool in front of a castle, and then you hear the double drum pedal, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
what?
What? And yeah, and it's
Nani?
just yeah, you're right. Yeah, and just Gojira up there just
Man,
just just destroying that place. I mean,
amazing.
and then all of a sudden, like Kelly Clarkson and the other guys start talking. I'm like, stop! Just stop saying words. I want to see this. They're like, oh my
Yeah.
god, the metal! It's just so metal. And I'm like, yes, we know.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yes.
And like
Sick.
they finally stopped, and they're just like, oh man, just
Man.
it was just the blood, like
Yeah.
fake blood thing shooting out, and just like the headless Marie Antoinette
Hmm.
singing along, and then like that operatic vocal. Oh my god,
Beautiful.
that went
Beautiful.
so hard. I
Yeah.
was just like, that was amazing. I
That
love.
and what's crazy is that that was an hour in to the opening ceremony, right? So
Yeah,
like
you had to
I can
get
see
through
why
that.
people were just like, I'm not watching the rest of this, because I got to that
Uh,
point where my wife and I were just like, what is this, right? And then it gets to that, and we're just like, oh, okay, okay, yeah. And
yeah,
then then
yeah.
it just got infinitely better from there.
It got better. There was two French pop artists there. There was
Oh,
like that one
Rimke and
like
Aya Nakamura. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Do you see like Snoop's reaction? Like while
Yes.
I was laughing so hard. He was just like grooving it. I was like, oh yeah. That was awesome. The French language being used for rap is such an incredible thing.
Mm,
Like you would think like a language like that being as like sort of flowy as it would be like might kind of conflict with certain like percussive
mm,
rhythmic structures that rap music will use, but like man, it was
mm.
incredible. I was like, that's dope. Like
Yeah.
that's I mean I although I think I did call him a discount pit bull at one point though, but I was also like I was also, I was feeling pretty good on my edible at that time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, but let's talk about though that finale with
Oh
Celine Dion.
my God, bro. That was
Uh,
so moving.
That was
Like,
very
guys, we
moving.
know this is an F1 podcast, but everyone stops for Celine Dion, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
stopped for Celine.
This
That
is
was
our
amazing.
podcast. We can talk about
Yeah.
Celine Dion
Yeah.
if we want.
Yeah.
But
Celine
yeah,
Dion or F off. That's the name of the
yes,
new pod.
that's right. My heart will go on or f off.
I love it.
Um,
I love it. Jack
maybe
totally
that.
had,
Ooh, that's
or
that. Ooh,
not
maybe
Jack,
that'll be the name of the
Rose.
episode today.
Yeah, my heart will
Yeah,
go on.
or f off.
Or F off.
Um, yeah, that was really moving, particularly because of like all the medical issues that she's had to
Hmm.
go through. That she
Yeah.
like almost couldn't sing anymore, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oof.
Yeah.
That's
So,
like if that's what you go out on, like if you
yeah,
just retire,
bro, that's what I'm saying.
that's finishing on
Yeah.
top. I'm
It
sorry,
was
that's finishing on top.
it was stunning. Like,
Hmm.
it completely stopped me in my tracks. I was just like, I mean, I was sitting, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, figuratively speaking, it just really took a hold of me, and you could see all that she was putting into it, and just,
Hmm.
it's amazing when you are living during a time where there's so many legends around you, right? You really take it for granted, right? And then when they go away or they retire, right? When they retire, if they pass away, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
You really miss their presence, right?
Right.
I think that's what is so cool. Again, just to kind of put a bow on all this, right, with the Olympics, and why I love watching the Olympics so much, is
Hmm.
that you're seeing people who this is like their one shot to do this,
Right.
right? Or maybe they're Michael Phelps and this is their fourth Olympics, and they're like, oh, I'm going to do it again. Just
Right.
get 29 easy, right? But you get to see them just put their all into it, and just like everything you're watching, just don't take it for granted, because it's just
Right.
really cool stuff that these people are doing out
Mhm.
there. Like,
Yeah.
they're training their entire lives for this, whether it's singing, performing, dancing, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? It's just
Yeah.
driving, right? Same
Right.
with today's race, right? We saw
Right.
some legends racing out there today, and from where Aston Martin finished, don't take it for granted that that Canadian legend Lance Stroll may not be on the track in a couple years. Oh, I meant Alonso.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I will say my last thought about the Olympics is that I usually don't pay attention to the Summer Olympics. I usually more of a Winter Olympics guy.
Really? Vice
Yes.
versa.
Between curling and the luge stuff and like the toboggan stuff and the like ice skate racing and like, the snowboarding and the ski jump, like all that stuff, like that to me is super exciting. With the Summer Olympics, really the huge things that the really the big thing I'm noticing that I've gotten out of this is the swimming is
Yeah.
really exciting.
Yes.
And the men like multi relay swimming event where the USA got gold, that is worth watching
Oh
because
yeah.
that was spectacular to see like how big of a lead that they pulled out in the like halfway through that relay is
Absolutely.
insane. But I also tried looking. I'm like, oh, shooting. This will be interesting. And they don't even show the gun shooting at the target. Like they
Dude,
just show the
you
close up
see
of
them
the
doing
people.
this.
Like
They're like,
he's here.
it's the weirdest thing. And they have like this little, they all look like Dr. Evils, right? Or they all look like just like this German Uber villain, right?
You
Just
know,
sitting there, they're like,
and here's the thing. This might be controversial, but why do they have all these like target like eye apparatuses and like special outfits and like stands for the guns to rest on? Like, isn't this supposed to be like an accuracy competition? Like, why don't you just give them a standardized rifle,
and they
have them
just,
stand in a place and try and shoot? Like, why do they have like a stand and they have all these things? It's just like, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
shooting you can pass. Fencing pretty fun. I haven't
Yeah.
seen archery yet, but that's
Yes.
that's next. So
Okay.
um, well, yeah. Well,
So
let's talk about the let's talk about
let,
our own Olympics.
let's talk about, okay, so real quick, there's a lot to talk about with Spa,
Yes.
because of like recent news that came out after the race.
Yeah.
So we will talk about that. I have a
Hmm.
lot of feelings and a lot of emotions, but
Yeah.
let's real quick talk about Hungary. Oh my God, not Hungary.
Yeah.
Talk about Austria, right?
No,
Let's.
Hungary.
Well, was it Hungary? Yeah, it was Hungary. You're right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yes,
I was
I'm
gonna say
mixing things up.
Austria
We already
happened a
did
while
Austria.
ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Hungary. Okay, so let's talk about Piastri's first win.
Mhm.
I think we're just gonna cut to the chase. We're gonna talk about McLaren, Norris, Piastri, team orders,
Yeah.
and what does this mean? Um, Gabe, you go first. You have a lot of thoughts that we were kind of mulling over for a little
I
bit. I want to
do.
hear what you think, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
I will admit I don't know all of the internal reasoning with McLaren as to
Mm-hmm.
like why they made the decisions that they did. But here's the thing that I don't understand. Okay, so you have both of McLaren's in P1 and 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're working through your pit strategy, right? For some reason, in partway through the race, they pit Norris
Mm-hmm.
and then they make Piastri stay out for an additional lap, which allowed Norris to close the pit gap. And so when Piastri finally came in and Norris went, he passed him on track. It was not close. He was already well into the first turn by the time Piastri came out. And then Norris had hot tires. He was on a flyer. He took off. He was multiple seconds down the road. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they immediately get on the horn and they tell Norris to reestablish the order. Now, if I suppose if they predetermine this before the race, that in this scenario, if Piastri is ahead in this part of the race, that we retain this order or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: if you're okay, for one, Norris, senior driver in McLaren, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
been with that team in their lean years and has basically helped to rebuild that team from
Sure.
the bottoms. Okay, there's no denying that. He's been there for a very long time at this point. He finally got his first win this year, right? He seems to be the only driver that's really been giving. He seemed at least up until that point the only driver that was really giving Max a run for his money, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, and also this is mid-season, which is something that Daniel Ricciardo brought up because Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz came to defend Norris. It's mid-season. It's not 3 races to go, right?
That's true.
Their guy Norris is the one that's in head in points, right?
Yep.
So why would they make the risk of having Norris destroy his lead that he had built up to allow Piastri to pass and then just
Yeah.
throw him into the clutches of Hamilton or whoever it was, I forget, that was chasing down Piastri because like Piastri had somebody on his tail.
Right.
Like, why would they do that? I don't
Yeah.
know why they would do that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, did they promise Piastri a win? Like, that doesn't seem like in the spirit of the sport to me.
Yeah.
That teams shouldn't be promising wins to people. That's like fixing. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
don't like that. So, in my estimation, just to summarize, I don't think that Norris should have been told to give up the position. I think that when Norris said, if he comes up to me, if he can get within like 2 seconds of my position, then I'll move aside and he can move over.
Mm-hmm.
Piastri didn't do that. He was still like 5 or 6 seconds behind when Norris slowed down on the straight.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was a call they should have made. I think I'm glad for Piastri. I'm glad he got a win, but I think that should have been Norris's race.
So, all right. Was that the bow?
Yeah,
the bow
that's my period.
Okay.
On
Full
this story
stop. You can take that to the bank, brother.
Yeah,
So
that was my sizzling fajita take.
Okay. I think I agree with you now. Initially, right, my understanding of the situation was that it sounds like from the McLaren morning, like pre-race briefings, right, that their strategy was whoever gets the first stop is the one who gets the preferred strategy. And they are the ones who they will be our lead driver for the race, right? And that ended up being Piastri based on when he stopped, because then I think they tried to do an undercut on someone, and then it was like, oh, hey, Piastri, come in now, right? And so because of that, per the agreement that they had prior to the race, right, this was how they were going to run the race, right? And at a certain point, they were saying that because you did that, you are the one who should be out in front because of strategy, right? Now, Norris didn't need, if I remember correctly, Norris didn't need to pit immediately and he was able to go a little longer, right? And he got the benefit from that, right? Just naturally because of how the race evolved, right? And so he was out in front, right? But based on the prior agreement, Piastri should be the one given preferential treatment, right? Should be getting the better strategies to ensure him the race win. So I feel like that's a little different from like fixing the race, but I get what you're saying, right? It's kind of the same. I guess the spirit of it's kind of the same, right? Even though, I'm sorry, no, the spirit feels different, the intention is different, but I can see how in its execution it feels the same, right? Um, and honestly, you're right. Right. I wasn't taking into consideration the fact that, yeah, we're like halfway through the season. Now it's like now or never. You need to be getting points at this point, right? Norris does not have the flexibility nor the point delta or the gap or anything like that to play around. He needs every single point he can get, right? And especially at that race, that was a damaging race to Verstappen. And this would have been a damaging race to Verstappen too, right? So I'm with you. Norris at this point, if McLaren wants a shot at the Drivers' Championship, because I think they have a really strong chance at the World Constructors' Championship. If they want a shot for Norris to win, he needs to be getting preferential treatment every single race. I'm sorry, no matter what. So I'm with you there too. Yeah, team orders definitely can leave a bad taste in my mouth. I've always liked that Mercedes has always been like, oh, go ahead and race it out on track. Just make sure
we saw this at Belgium. We saw this at the race today.
We saw it today. Yeah. And it's great. I think that's the preferred way to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Like that happens a lot where Lewis would get preferential treatment or Bottas would get preferential treatment. And then the other would pull up behind them and they're much faster. And it's like, yeah, you guys are free to race. Just make sure it's clean. Right.
Yeah.
And then you hear on the podium afterwards, whether it's Lewis who won or Bottas who won. Right. Like you have to go back to that era because that's when Mercedes was like consistently fighting for 1-2s and podiums. Yeah. And they would just say, oh man, he stopped before me. He was on a good strategy, but I just wasn't able to keep up with him. End of discussion. Right. And it should have been the same thing for McLaren at Hungary. It should have been the same thing. The other sucky part about this is that Piastri won the race under, I think some people would say dubious circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Like, did he do it on merit?
A little sticky. Yeah.
Right. Like, did he do it on merit? Right.
No.
I mean, no. And in a certain sense, because you look at how Norris was just like destroying, like, dude, he at a certain point, he was like 6 seconds ahead, right?
He was 6 seconds ahead of Piastri while they were telling him to
the
slow
race
down.
is over. The race is over at that point.
That's my point. Okay,
Right.
It's like I understand if you do the preferential treatment thing, right? Because like Piastri was ahead for early stages of the race, right?
Right.
But then they pitted Norris, and then they left Piastri out to dry, like for an extra lap. And even at the time, David Coulthard was like, "Why didn't they pull Piastri in like immediately?" Right. Norris they just handed the race to Norris, and they literally did because Norris passed him in the pit.
Right.
And then he had this huge multi-second lead, and McLaren are just like, "Okay, reestablish the order." And it's like,
no,
what?
No,
dude,
no
there's 6 seconds between us. If he was right on my tail, then that's one thing. But he was 6 seconds ahead. That is not a small margin.
And it sucks for Piastri too, because it doesn't, like, I'm sure in some way this feels kind of sullied, right? And I'm sure it's the same thing with Max. I always bring this up, right? Because I think it's really important to talk about. But like with how Max won over Lewis, right? Like he'll never say this publicly, but I would imagine like at a certain level, a certain point, he's like, man, I wish Massey hadn't interfered so I could like win on merit or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I think most athletes and performers feel that way where they're like, yeah, like I beat you because I beat you, right? Like, like no fouls, no free throws, nothing like that, right?
I think that the most a team orders should be given. I think there's 2 instances where team orders are merited to me. Okay. One is if they say we're trying to get a maximum amount of points, hold position. Right. If they just tell them hold the positions and bring it home, that's
different.
Yeah. That's fine, right? Or if there's a scenario where the driver ahead is clearly holding up the other teammate, and the other teammate is clearly faster, then you'd be like, hey, like you got 3 laps to make up the difference to your rival ahead, or else we're going to release your teammate. And if they don't within those 3 laps, then they let him go.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But like when there's a big gap and you're just like, no, you got to slow down. You got to get rid of this gap and put yourself in danger for your rival behind you. We're going to risk our 1-2 finish for the sake of what we said we're going to do. I think if anybody's curious about a worse version of this, There was an instance, I forget what time, I think it was early 2000s, maybe like 2003. It was Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello.
Mm,
Rubens Barrichello hadn't, I don't think he had gotten a win at that point, and he had like commanding lead of this entire race, right? And then they told him to allow Michael to pass him.
mm.
And Barrichello was just like, why? Like, I'm gonna win this, and they're just like, no, we need maximal points for Michael, who, by the way, was already way ahead in the
He doesn't.
drivers'
Yeah.
championship anyway. He could have taken a second place, but they
Mhm.
made Barrichello. He literally waited till like feet before the finish line to allow him to pass. Like, he wanted it to be known, I won this race. And then Ferrari ended up getting fined because Michael Schumacher felt so bad, he put Rubens Barrichello on the
Mhm.
front step of the podium and gave
Yep.
him the number one trophy for him to stand on, and they got fined for that because it was breaching procedure.
Yeah, that's where that
So
picture. If yeah, for anyone wondering the origin story on that picture, that's what it's from.
yeah,
Yeah, because even
yeah.
even Michael knew. Even Michael was like, yeah,
Yeah,
this
even
is
Michael was like, "Oh, this wasn't
yeah,
great," and
yeah,
Rubens Barrichello was pissed. I
yeah.
don't blame him.
Dude, I'd be
That's
livid.
terrible.
I'd
Yeah,
be
that's
livid. Yeah,
good for Ferrari getting
yeah.
fined for that.
Mm.
My last thing I'm going to say about the Hungary, because we should talk about Spa, is
Mhm.
boy, Max mad. Max
Dude,
want win.
bro, he was hot,
He was hot.
hot.
They were. I mean, they were. That was like some Desperate Housewives level drama
Dude,
going on. Like a lot of cattiness, a lot of just snipping,
yeah,
snapping back at each other. And I was like, dude, what
yeah.
the hell?
I I think there's some things going on behind the scenes at Red Bull for sure that none of us are privy to, other than those who are actually in those rooms and conversations. But yeah, things are going on, and he's not happy, and he's just letting it
Right,
all out on the radio, and
right.
that stinks, man. Like,
Hmm. Right, and then he let his temper get ahead of him, and he
mhm.
got pitched by Hamilton, down at the first turn. I
So
mean,
we got to talk about that too.
yeah,
The racing incident, no, man, that's not a racing. I think Lewis was being very kind, right?
yeah. Oh,
Because
of course, yeah.
he's not trying to step in stuff, right? He's just
No,
like,
no,
look,
he's
man,
not
what am I,
trying. He's
right?
not coming after
And
Max for that. Yeah,
right, and so then the stewards, for them to say like, oh, Lewis could have done more to avoid that, like,
I don't understand.
Nani?
If you watch the footage, right? If you watch the footage, like
Yeah.
Max, his entire body, like his
Yeah.
helmet and his body, were already past Hamilton's front wheels,
Yeah.
right? Like they were already like they were at or in front of Hamilton's front wheels, right?
Hmm.
Hamilton was going to turn into, like, when you think about Formula One, they have microseconds to react, right?
Hmm.
It's like what they say in the IndyCar: if you see somebody crashing, it's actually more. It's like you're supposed to drive towards them because they will not be where they're at by the time you get there,
Right.
sort of thing, right?
Right.
And so those are the kind of levels of reactions you have to deal with in F1. So like Hamilton was making the apex of the turn, because I'm assuming he thought that Max had enough grip to make that turn, but Max just like locked up,
Dude,
just went beeline into the inside of that corner, and just he got clipped.
you
There
know,
was nothing Lewis could have done.
dude,
He
the
was
way
literally in a impossible position there.
the way he drove was like how I drive when I'm playing Forza Online. You know? Like, I'm trying to make the corner. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's like, good luck, everybody else.
Yeah. He pulled a stroll there. That's what he did.
That
But
was
yeah,
so bad.
it was really bad.
That
And
was that was very amateur racing from him.
it
You know,
was.
and I think what that shows is that sometimes when Max loses his cool,
Mhm.
his racecraft just falls off, and it's awful to
Yeah.
see because
And
he's a world class driver. He's a champion. You know.
when he's by himself, yeah. The minute he's like he's fighting for a win and he has to like actually race against people, he loses his cool.
Mm,
Like every single time it's happened, that's the scenario. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Um,
Mm, mm,
but
mm.
yeah, he needs to figure it out. Like I'm pretty convinced that if Red Bull if he continues to be on this trajectory of failing races, he's
Yeah.
gonna leave. I
Well,
don't think
I don't
he has
know.
enough patience to not be on the top anymore.
Did you hear about his updated contract clauses? The rumors.
No.
So previously, there was a rumor that he would be able to leave Red Bull if Helmut Marco leaves, right? If Marco
Mhm.
leaves, they call it the Marco clause, right? If Marco leaves, Max can leave, right? And it looked like that's the direction. Looks like that was the direction things were heading, right? With the whole
Mhm.
scandal that happened at the beginning of the season. Um,
Mhm.
but it sounds like contract renegotiations happened and that clause has been removed. So he might be locked in at Red Bull at least through the end of 26, right? So if that's the case, right? And like also too, like there's like the rumor mill is that the 26 car, the engine, the power unit is not looking good, right? That they're having some difficulties with it, right? So if he sees all these issues that are coming up on top of all the issues that Red Bull has been dealing with this year, on top of the fact that his dad is publicly calling out Christian Horner all the time, and they're just like talking back for like, dude, could you imagine if your dad was like really upset with your boss and your boss is upset with your dad and they're just tweeting at each other and like subtweeting? Like, what? That'd be so uncomfortable. And you're just supposed to be like, oh, yeah, man, I just make guitar, I just repair guitars, man. That's what I do.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about the love of the game and love of the craft, and
Right.
we really went in there to win it, and yeah. What?
Yeah. He just comes in and it's like, hey, your dad's being a real dick, okay? He better keep himself in line, or else you're gonna be sweeping up the bathroom, and that's gonna be your job.
And you're just like,
Yeah.
whoa, my livelihood, because this, bro, this is wild. It's
I don't.
there's a huge elephant. There are many elephants in the room.
Right. Yeah, and they're all yelling at each other at the same time.
Yeah, Red Bull is Barnum and Bailey Circus, y'all. That's what it is. Max is like juggling on a unicycle.
Well,
Marco's cracking a whip.
Speaking of a circus, let's talk about the circus of Belgium.
Spa-Francorchamps.
Yeah, because there was a lot of wacky stuff that happened this weekend. I mean, easy stuff, like more, kind of mundane things, I guess you could say. Alpine had a pretty sweet new liveries to showcase. Wolverine and Deadpool movie, which apparently set a Guinness Book of World Record for the most watched trailer on the first day of release ever for any movie.
I'm not surprised, dude. Wolverine is beloved.
Wolverine is that guy. Yeah, I mean that's great, but I guess I'm a little surprised. But I also think that record's probably amplified by the internet now. So but yeah, that was pretty sweet. Yeah, I guess Max was pretty fast pretty much all weekend long. But the problem that Max and Red Bull are having, and we saw this, they are pretty much maxed out on all of their
Are they maxed out?
Yes, they are maxed out. Mm-hmm, yeah. They're maxed out on all of their allotted replacement parts for their engine and their car at this point. I think they have like one electronic unit that they can that they can put in, but like any changes to the engine chassis, they're going to get grid penalties from here on out, which is not good for them.
That's brutal.
And Max had an engine change. You got a 10 grid spot penalty, which just made qualifying what it is.
Yeah. But I was going to say real quick, that makes you wonder then, what the heck has Red Bull been doing this entire first half of the season? I didn't realize they were swapping their power units that quickly.
Yeah.
Does that indicates to me some kind of underlying like structural issue? Well, not actual like structure, like resistance of this. Like we're talking like material strength, not that. I'm talking like the framework of how that engine's built, right? Because it's the zero height engine, right? And that is it just eating itself up? It must be.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, or maybe they don't think anybody's going to notice. I don't know. I think that's a good point. I think it's possible that they are, their engines are just not reliable, like over an X amount of race reuses, and instead of like risking it, they're just like, well, let's just swap it, because we want to build up a bunch of points, leads ahead of time, early in the season. So that's possible. I didn't think of that, but yeah, Max had a 10 grid spot penalty. Leclerc took the pole.
Did he?
He did,
but he inherited.
He inherited it. Yeah.
Much like someone else.
We'll talk about. Well, yeah. So, let's just kind of talk about the rest of that generally. So, the tracks had a resurface, which is always going to throw a wrench in the works for any race, at any time. We saw a lot of that. There's a lot of tracks that got resurfaced this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mid Ohio got a resurface.
Beijing was painted.
Beijing was painted, yeah. Right. um I saw there were parts of like the Iowa track and IndyCar that were repainted too, and now Spa. So that usually a resurfacing of a track makes it pretty quick. But also there's no rubber like really like ground into the track. So that also makes that racing offline is a little bit more perilous than it might normally be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Max had a 10 spot grid penalty, and then what happened to Yuki Tsunoda, Idris?
So Yuki had to change. You guys remember how we talked about how McLaren had to circle their entire car last year when they submitted their upgrade packages? Yeah, so similar kind of thing happened with Yuki, and they had to replace so many parts of his car. And because of that, he had a 60 place grid penalty, right? So just you're starting at the back, buddy. And there's a clip of him. They tell him that like before quality, and he's like, "Oh Jesus." The way he said it was so cute. It was so cute the way he said it, man. It was just, oh man.
Yuki Tsunoda's great. I hope he sticks around for a while, and I hope he gets a better drive.
Me too. On the actually real quick about that, since we're talking about VCarb, some news about Red Bull. The rumor is that there will be there's going to be a race off, right? A lap shootout between Liam Lawson and Danny Rick to see who is going to be the person who can backflip. This is a rumor, right? But this is also from like Planet F1, which is like not like the most reliable.
Yeah. Okay.
Not Planet F1. I'm sorry. Oh my god, I'm mixing it up with the other name. I think Planet F1's typically pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's a rumor from some site. I can't recall the name of it, but yeah, that might happen, and I don't know why.
Where?
Like it's
with what? I mean, what are they going to use this year's cars? They're not allowed to do that.
Going to use 2010 Toyota Camrys who can whip it into the parking spot at a McDonald's.
Demolition Derby. Helmet Marco at the helm.
Grave digger. Sunday. Sunday,
Liam the Buzzsaw Lawson
versus Danny. Danny Vegemite Ricardo.
Danny the ridiculous Ricardo. Face off in a hand-to-hand fist match on the track to the death. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. Oh, shootout. What is this? That's such. Oh God, I hate that.
Racing for pigs.
Meanwhile, Yuki's sitting over here with his 60 spot grid.
Oh Jesus!
It's like, oh Jesus, guys. What the hell? Just give me the seat, damn it. I've been here. I'm loyal.
Oh man. Like, baby, I'm here. I know it's
I don't know why, but I just imagine Yuki Tsunoda showing up, but in like a monster truck that's based off a K-car truck.
Yeah.
Like one of those little tiny ones. Just like, come on. He'd still probably kick their asses.
Now this is pod racing.
Well, anyway, let's just talk about the race real quick.
Yeah.
Because we got a few more things to get up to. We're skipping out on time here. Lewis put up in a tremendous fight. Mercedes, man, they're coming back.
Yes.
I think like Mercedes and McLaren. Like they're back, baby. But we had an interesting situation occur, right? Russell decided he was going to do a one-stop strategy, which nobody thought he would really be able to do. But here's the thing, like Spa doesn't, I don't think Spa punishes tires as much as you might think. The Eau Rouge corner is pretty intense G-force wise, but there's a lot of long straights. There's a lot of easy curves. there's a lot of stuff that's like it's long and swooping, right? And typically tires are going to get shredded up by stuff that's really high downforce,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of lateral movement,
Yep.
But Spa doesn't really have a whole lot of that. Like it kind of eases into its turns. It's a very
It's more of a
graceful
roller
track.
coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Russell was able to pull off a one stop strategy. Lewis was punching back at him right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Max was getting hounded by Norris, and Piastri was right up the tail end, and Sergio Perez was nowhere to be found. Um, so I mean, come
Who made
on, the
it to
guy
who made it to Q3 by the way during qualifying? So
he
he
did, and
overcame that. So that's
he
good.
got P2, but then, but in a Red Bull, that's the thing. Like I thought the Red Bulls are supposed to be like the superior car, right? Apparently not. And
Yeah.
so there goes Louis Hammy,
Louis
and
Hammy.
Russell coming up the rear, and Russell takes the win, but not for long.
Yeah. So after the race, the
He had a
stewards
lot of
call,
hustle,
yeah, the Russell
but
hustle
the Russell hustle.
hit a wall and ran into the wall of the stewards, and they said, "Hey man, during scrutineering, we checked your car, and you were 1.5 kilograms underweight. What happened there, buddy?" And then Toto's like, "No, no, this is so wrong." And they're trying to figure out what happened, and it looks like he was underfueled,
Yeah,
and he gets deked for that.
yeah,
And them's the rules, and that
literally
really,
DQ'd,
yeah,
full
actually gets,
disqualification.
yeah, full disqualification. And it's on one hand, it's cool because they're sticking to the rules, right? But on the other hand, ouch. So Mercedes loses the 1-2, Russell
Yep.
loses the win. Like Russell,
Hmm.
like it gets like not even like demoted, like position wise, just
Yeah.
like completely deked, like
Yep.
DQ disqualified, not
Hmm.
even can't even get any points this race.
Yep.
So the big winner here is Ricardo, who gets up, gets into the points and gets a point
Hmm.
over Tsunoda actually, because Tsunoda wasn't doing super well this weekend, just given all
Hmm.
of the changes to his car. Um, and Hamilton in here, so the race win, and it's great, like he gets some extra points and he gets another race win for the season. But also like on a certain level, that also probably doesn't feel super good to inherit a win like that, right?
Sure.
Like a win's a win, right? And
Right.
if Lewis were competing for a championship, I'm sure it would be like, oh, this is great, like this is a win's a win, right?
Right.
But man, I'm sure it's like sour, definitely bittersweet over at Mercedes, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis put up a fight. It's not like he was like 12 seconds
Oh
behind
yeah, yeah,
Russell.
yeah, yeah. No, they were
He was
close.
right on his tail pretty much the whole time.
Right.
I think he probably didn't push too hard because he didn't want to screw up a 1-2, which is ironic
Yeah.
considering that Russell was the one who screwed up the 1-2. Well, I'll say his team. Um, because I don't think Russell was aware that he was underfueled. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was
Um,
underfueled, right?
yeah,
Was
yeah,
that what
he
they
was
resulted they
underweight.
found
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
And I think that like Hamilton, I think he's happy that he's got the win, obviously. But I think that had Russell done a two-stop strategy like everybody else, Hamilton would have won. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Um, because that's the only reason why Russell was in P1 after all the pit stop changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Lewis was chasing him down, but he did have something extra down the straights.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and the thing is like a weight can make a difference. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it makes that big of a difference if it's that small,
I mean, you
but
you got to think like we're talking like momentum and second moment of inertia, which
mhm,
is a whole thing we can get into. But like those effects can compound, right? Because you're talking about variables and factors that you begin squaring and cubing in certain instances. Not for this in particular, but it may make a difference, even if it's like tenths of a second or hundredths of a
yeah,
second.
right, yeah. I mean, yeah, they don't even paint the cars anymore, like to
Yeah,
try and save weight. Um, so yeah, pretty bad for Russell, but
yeah, that
I'm
stinks,
glad
man.
that I'm glad Lewis Hamilton got another win because you know the guy broke the 300 lap start, a race start curse, And I think that he's entering new territory, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, I really hope Ferrari picks up some momentum going into next year because it looks like McLaren is the one with the momentum at this point.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So I gotta ask. So how does this have you feeling about Lewis's move to Ferrari next season? And then also, what does this make you think about Carlos's options? Because one of the rumors right now is that Carlos is gonna go to Williams. That is one that's been flying around the last couple of days.
Um,
Because you look at Mercedes and they seem to be getting back on form, right?
yeah. Right. They've offered money to Carlos. He's
Yeah.
turned him down. So, um, yeah, I guess that's a good question. I think, honestly, Hamilton is the GOAT.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, whatever he wants to do from this point on is just whatever he wants to do. He's still going to finish on top. I mean, even Max would have to get four more world championship titles to catch up to Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And this Red Bull dominance is not going to last. So I think honestly the thing I'm worried most about with Hamilton is actually the culture around Ferrari, because
Mm.
as we know, Hamilton very much uses his platform for things he cares about, like
Mm-hmm.
climate change and LGBTQ rights and Black Lives Matter messaging and things. And I worry that Ferrari is not going to let him do that, and that would suck. That would feel like Hamilton's sort of some of the more important and better aspects of Hamilton as an world class athlete are just going to be stifled.
Yeah.
So I worry about that because I know Ferrari can be kind of stuffy. Um, but yeah, man, I'm excited to see what he does in a Ferrari. We
For
know it
sure.
can win. We've
Yeah.
seen it. I mean, it's at the top, and I think this would just go to show that like Hamilton is just on a different class of race car driver if he can just win with Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
So, but with McLaren having that reinsurgence, my conspiracy, or not my conspiracy, but like my thought that maybe Lewis Hamilton will re-end his career with a McLaren, looking more of a possibility if
Mm.
if they keep performing the way that they do. So
Mm.
I
Yeah.
guess we'll see.
I mean, I for sure, if Lewis were driving that McLaren, he'd be winning races for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. And he's probably thinking about that.
Mm.
Um, Well, yeah. Well, so
Mm.
what else happened that you want to talk about? Because
Uh,
there's some really wacky news that was going on.
so
Um,
the last bit of wacky F1 news, I think we can switch over to IndyCar after this. So I think everyone is aware that there's no love that's been lost between Esteban Ocon and Alpine. Like they're not
Only
they're not
Alpine
cool. Yeah. Well, and Gasly
and
and
Alonso
Alonso and just
and
there's a
Perez.
list. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
whole list. And Max, remember he got in his
Hmm.
face
Yep.
2018 or something like that about some nonsense.
Hmm.
Yeah, just a lot of people were just like, I don't like this guy. But
They don't like
I'll,
SD Bestie.
yeah.
Are you really
SD bestie friend, right?
SD
So
Bestie?
Alpine lent Ocon a company car, right? So it's probably like a
Hmm.
really nice Renault that he's driving around
That's
England and
probably the Alpine car. They have like a street car now.
Sure, yeah. So he's
Yeah.
driving that around, right? Driving from Enstone. And he decides he's gonna go to the Williams factory, just spend half a day there, just talk with them, right? And they tracked his car because they have like a GPS sensor in the car, right? So they tracked it to his location and they knew he was hanging out at Williams, right? And this was after they'd kicked him off the team. So for him, he's like going around just like
I don't care.
he's like
He's
putting his
pooping on
resume out.
company time, man.
But, but, but what's crazy though is that like I have so many questions about this, right? Like the first thing that comes to mind is like the EU has their GDPR like data privacy rights like package bill that has to be followed by all companies, right? So you can't just track people and like you know collect their data. Does that does this break that? Like
I mean, if it's a company car, that's their property. So I think they're
that's
probably in
fair.
the right of using their own property.
Yeah. But
I
there's like
mean,
assumptions and insinuations you can make about the length of time spent at a specific location if you know who was there. Like the whole
mhm.
point is just that it's kind of weird and like I don't know.
Couldn't Esteban Ocon have gotten an Uber?
Bro, that's what I'm saying, man. He could just buy Uber, you know?
I mean, well, like he went to the Williams factory. I'm sure Williams are like, "Hey, Esteban, what are you doing here?"
I'm just hanging out.
Like, I mean, Carlos is in the back room, like, "Yeah, so let's go over here, not this way." Like, um, yeah. Well, I think Esteban's desperately trying to stay in the grid, but
Yeah. I mean,
Esteban to me,
yeah.
the only thing that Esteban has over Lance Stroll is that he has a win. I mean, they're both to me. They were both guys that I'm just like, okay,
Oh my
you've
God.
overstayed your welcome. We need
You
new
think so?
blood coming in.
I
Yeah,
think Esteban Ocon is actually a solid driver. I think he's a much better driver than Stroll.
he's a better driver than
Yeah.
Stroll, but that just goes without saying.
I mean, if we
But
have a list of people who need to leave the grid,
I mean,
he's not in the top.
Stroll's here. Like Esteban's like there, you know what I mean? Like here's the thing, like Esteban Ocon's I've never seen, I don't remember him putting in like I mean he won Hungary the one year, but that was
Mhm.
after like a huge first turn accident that took out like 6 cars. And
Mhm.
then Fernando Alonso spent his entire race
Just defending.
defending Ocon and keeping all the other drivers away from him so that he could eke out a win.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen Esteban Ocon put in an effort on merit that seemed really impressive to me.
Mhm.
So
That's fair.
I don't know. I've just never been impressed by the guy. I've never
Yeah.
have. Like he hasn't done like, Pierre Gasly has like a story of like things that he's done. Like he's done a
Mhm.
lot with the Toro Rosso team and the AlphaTauri,
Yeah.
and like he had his failed stint at Red Bull. He has a story. He has an arc. He has something
Mhm.
that grounds him that makes me want to like him as a person.
Sure. Sure.
I know Esteban came from not a lot and sort of worked his way up, and that's great. But also, dude, people don't like racing with you.
Mhm.
And you're
Yeah.
holding a grudge over Pierre Gasly about a kart race that happened when you were like, you still had 1 in the front of your age number.
You
Or
kissed
0.
my crush. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. Basically, that's what it sounds like. So I don't really care. I don't have any patience for Esteban Ocon. I don't really care if he's in the grid, next year.
Bestie though.
Honestly, I kind of feel bad for Zhou Guan Yu,
Oh
because
man.
nobody is shedding a
one's talking
tear
about
that
him.
Zhou Guan Yu is not coming back, and also Zhou Guan Yu has been, I would say, unfortunately, with the exception of that big crash that he had, he has pretty much been invisible his
Yeah.
entire career in F1. Like
Yeah.
nobody really talks about him. He's not done
Yeah.
anything that's been spectacular or interesting. Like,
It's unfortunate. I feel
yeah,
like. Do you think it's more the fact that he's driving for Kick Sauber? Like,
no.
you really? Yeah.
No, I don't think it's that, because even I mean, you can make that excuse with any driver, but like you
Yeah.
look at a team like Haas. Haas had a lot of
That's
interesting
true.
stuff happen. Like K-Mag getting a crazy podium, Hulkenberg doing moves, K-Mag quiet quitting on track.
Mhm.
Like, there's ways that you can give yourself attention or put yourself in a position that people are going to know you or
Yeah.
find you memorable. And he just hasn't really done that. I
Yeah.
think the most memorable thing I remember from Zhou Guan Yu is before he was announced as racing for Sauber, the Alfa Romeo dealership in China had put his face on like a giant window and said like new F1 driver before it was
Yeah.
announced.
Oh.
I remember that being like a thing, and then it was announced. But yeah, other than that, like, I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy and I'm sure he's talented, but like, he's just, you got to work with what you got. And,
Yeah.
Bottas outdoes him every time.
Bottas is doing. Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So is it confirmed he's not coming back next season? Like,
I mean, aren't those seats counted for? I mean,
well,
Hulkenberg has got the one,
it's
right?
Hulkenberg, and then I think they say the other seat's open, but that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's not going to be Joe. I mean,
I
it's
suppose
probably a
that's
fair
true.
fair assumption
Yeah.
to say that's not going to be him, but
hmm
nothing's been signed yet.
Yeah, well, they're also trying to figure out what's happening with Bottas, which there's a rumor that Bottas might end up at Indy, in the IndyCar
Ooh.
series, which honestly,
I love it.
I think he'd have fun.
Bring him over. Yeah.
And with that mohawk and that mustache, he'd fit right in.
Oh, dude, he's fit right in.
Like,
He's fit right
with
in.
the social media campaign, they'd love him.
Mhm.
That would be awesome. And I like any F1 driver that wants to come to Indy because then that means I
Please
get to
do.
meet them at a meet and greet.
Yes.
So
And also it's way more affordable for us to go.
way more affordable. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking
Speaking
of
of Indy,
IndyCar, yeah, there's a couple of they had the race in Toronto, which
mhm.
was won by Colton Herta, which was well deserved. The guy had 3 podiums, including that race. He was the first time that an IndyCar driver dominated every single session, got the pole, and then won the race. That was the first time
Damn.
that had happened. So it was a
Damn.
total domination by Colton Herta, and well needed because the guy had 3 podiums this year, and like this is the only win he's got
Yeah.
since 2022. Um, but there was a huge moment, and if you haven't seen it, you should. There was a
Scary.
big accident on the Toronto track, and essentially a Ward became a springboard for Ferrucci because he just came around the corner and literally flew into the air and almost completely flipped over. Um, really freaky stuff, like really
Hmm.
terrifying. But it's incredible how rigid those cars are.
Yeah.
Like compared to the ones in the 90s, like they hit a wall and just go and it just shatters into a million pieces. And they talk about it in the old telecast. They're just like, these cars are designed to break apart as a safety feature. I'm like, what?
I mean, that is a good thing though, because that's energy dispersion. Like
I
you
mean, it's
want
true.
that to
Yeah,
happen at a
I
certain
guess
level.
that's true. Yeah, but then when tires go flying into the crowd, it's not really a safety
Yes.
feature,
That needs
Um, you
it's a
know,
feature, not a bug.
right? You should have dodged faster. But yeah, that was a pretty intense accident. Well, what's funny, really too, real quick before we wrap it up, I was gonna say something that I have been doing because I have a lot of time while I'm working. I have my headphones on and I'm just kind of, doing my work. And on my phone, I've been watching all of the full broadcasts of the Indy
Hmm.
500s. I
Yeah.
started in 1979 because it's sort of a magical year for a lot of motorsport. It was like the first televised Daytona 500. It was a really important race in IndyCar too, like as it was like started to begin the transition of like a lot more safety concerns and things of that
Hmm.
nature. But what I think is really intense is that there's a lot of moments they were obsessed. ABC was obsessed with telling you how safe these cars are and how safe the track is. You have Jackie Stewart out there doing a whole special breakdown feature while the yellow caution's happening. And he's just like, yeah, like these cars, they break and like, or like the dispersed energy and like he's like, they have our better safety record. Then he's like talking about the tracks, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, I guess that's safe. And then it does like a hard cut, and it's just like Danny Gaius has crashed into the wall in a huge explosion in his body. His like legs are just like holding out in
Yeah.
the track. And I'm like, oh my god, like could you imagine watching that live where they're just telling you about how safe the racing is, then all of a sudden it just hard cuts to like this horrendous track the crash they have in a track. Like I
Ugh.
was just like, this is safe for you guys?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
are you
laughing because I'm
serious?
uncomfortable, guys. Like that's
Yeah,
yeah. Ugh.
it was
Ugh.
really bad. I mean,
Yeah.
there are some really intense crashes. And they're like, there are dudes that are on fire, but you can't see it because it's an alcohol fire. And like, I learned that now too. I was always wondering why they spray water at
Yeah.
the fuel tank in IndyCar
Yeah.
when they drive off. It's because alcohol dissolves with water. And so if there's any spillage or if there's any sort of like, residual alcohol that comes out
Yeah.
from
With
when
the
they
few
pull the thing, they,
right.
they hose the car with water so that it doesn't set on fire.
Right.
Which is fascinating. But yeah, I'm glad I'm watching it. I got up to 1992 with Indy, and I'm gonna start with Daytona. Actually, I'm gonna do all the Daytona 500s up to 92 as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, man, I could go on for forever, but I will say that if you don't think the Andretti curse or Andretti jinx is real, you need to watch these races because two of these races in 1987, Mario Andretti led the entire race up into the last 20 minutes and
Hmm.
the last 20 laps and his car failed.
Yep.
And then
And that
Michael
was
Andretti in 92, same thing. He
yeah.
led the entire race up until like the last 5 laps and his car shut down.
And actually, so to show the F1 link here, Adrian Newey was working in IndyCar at the time,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
working with Andretti on that car. So, and he
Uh-huh.
was like he was his engineer during
Yeah.
that season, And if I remember correctly, it was something. It was an issue with the gearbox or the fuel pump,
Hmm.
and it just yeah. And they found out
Just failed.
afterwards, and yeah, they're just like, oh, they were like,
Yeah, I remember
we wouldn't have
hearing.
seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard Adrian Newey's name, and I'm like, Adrian Newey?
Yeah.
All the
Yeah.
pieces are coming
Yep.
together.
Yeah.
Um,
It all
if
connects.
you guys have the time to watch any of those, they're all on YouTube.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm gonna work my way all the way up to present day because I feel like I sort of owe it to myself to sort of have that kind of background context and like sort of know
Hmm.
where a lot of things are. I'll probably get a lot more references and recognize a lot more people. Um, but yeah, also AJ Foyt, he was like 56 when he ran his last Indy 500. So I don't want to hear
Eesh.
anything about Fernando Alonso being too old. Okay,
Yeah.
like if he can do this in at 42 in an F1 car,
He'll be
like
43.
40, yeah, right. I mean, I'm sure. I know he doesn't want to race ovals because they're pretty dangerous, but I'm pretty sure he would do pretty damn well in F1 if we're being
Hmm.
on, or in IndyCar if
IndyCar.
we're being
Yeah.
honest. But you know, who knows? We'll see how that goes. But
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
That
That's all.
yeah.
That's that's all,
That's all,
folks.
folks. Yeah. So yeah, no, this is definitely a jam-packed episode because we wanted to talk about the Olympics and Hungary and Spa and IndyCar.
Yeah.
So thanks for sticking in there with us, folks. Really appreciate it. Gabe, you want to do our outro?
Yeah, I'll do it. Um. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. It's been too long. Thanks everybody for listening to F1 or F off. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to hit us up and tell us how terrible and mid we are, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and X, all at F1 or F off. You can also send us an email at F1 or F off podcast at gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps us out a lot, and it helps us to know that we are doing well, despite having our little sabbaticals and like periods of time that we gap with all of our life happening.
Mm-hmm.
But please tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, tell your bosses, tell the lady at the bank, tell the person that makes your coffee.
The people who are in the can line, all that.
Yeah. Tell the Louis Vuitton people, Louis Vuitton dancers, tell Celine Dion. I'm sure she'll like it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's it.
That's all, folks. All right, thanks, guys.
That's all, folks.
Peace.